I was 19 years old when a stranger looked at my hand and told me my life would break me twice. I laughed. I should have listened. My name is Suman. I grew up in Sundarvan, a small village pressed against the edge of a river, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your sorrows in equal measure. We were poor. Not the romantic kind of poor that people describe in stories. The real kind. The kind where your mother's hands bleed from working other people's fields, and you count every grain of rice before you cook it, and you learn very early that life does not owe you anything. My mother, Anita, was the strongest woman I have ever known. She worked from before sunrise until after dark, and she never once complained in front of me. She saved that for the nights when she thought I was asleep. I would lie still and listen to her cry quietly in the dark, and I would stare at the ceiling and make silent promises to the God I wasn't sure was listening. That one day, things would be different. That one day, I would give her a reason to stop crying. I was sweeping the front of our house the morning the sadhu came. He was old. Thin. The kind of man who seems to be made of dust and distance. He stood at our doorway and asked for alms, and I called out to him the way we always did. Come, sit, I will bring something. I brought him water. Simple, clean water in a clay cup. He drank it slowly, and when he handed the cup back, he looked at me in a way that made me feel suddenly still. Like time had paused. He said, "Child, show me your right hand." I held it out without thinking. He studied my palm for a long time. His face gave nothing away. And then he spoke. He said my married life would be filled with difficulty. That happiness would come, but only briefly. And then he said the thing that stayed with me for years, the thing I tried so hard to forget. He said there were 2 marriages written in my fate. 2. And that the road between them would be paved with suffering I could not yet imagine. I pulled my hand back. I almost laughed. I was 19. I had never even been in love. 2 marriages felt like a fairy tale, an absurd, dark fairy tale. My mother came home that evening and I told her everything. She shook her head and held my face in both her hands. Suman, she said, our fate is made by our choices. Not by a stranger's words. Stop thinking about it. Just work hard and live well. She said it so firmly, so lovingly, that I believed her. I let the old man's words sink to the bottom of my mind like a stone sinking in still water. I did not think about them again for a long time. Because then Rajesh came into my life. He was the landlord's son. The landlord of our village, a powerful man, respected, feared a little. His son Rajesh had grown up watching me from a distance. I didn't know that then. What I knew was that one day he appeared at our door with his father, formally, with flowers and words about marriage. The landlord himself said he had chosen me for his son. My mother and I sat very still and said very little, and afterward, when they left, we looked at each other across the small dark room and I saw something in my mother's eyes that I had never seen before. Hope. The landlord's money. His land. His name. It meant that I would never again count rice grains before cooking. It meant my mother could rest. It meant that the bleeding hands and the quiet nighttime crying might finally stop. We said yes. The wedding was everything a poor girl from Sundarvan could dream of. Lights and music and a borrowed silk saree that made my mother gasp when she saw me in it. I stood at the fire and made my promises and I believed every single one of them. I looked at Rajesh and I thought, this is the beginning. This is where the hard part ends. The first year was beautiful. Rajesh was kind. The house was warm. There was food, and there was laughter, and my mother-in-law treated me with a dignity I had never expected. I used to sit in the courtyard in the afternoons and think about the sadhu's warning and smile to myself. See, I would think. See how wrong you were, old man. My life is not suffering. My life is good. My husband is good. I am living better than I ever dreamed. I was a fool. Not because I was naive. But because I didn't understand yet that life sometimes lets you feel safe just before it takes everything. The landlord died. A sudden illness, 1 bad month, and then he was gone. And Rajesh changed overnight. It was not gradual the way people describe these things. It was immediate. Like a mask being removed. The man I had married, patient, soft-spoken, gentle, disappeared the day they lowered his father into the ground. What replaced him was something I did not recognize. He started drinking. Not occasionally. Every day. Heavily. The kind of drinking that turns a man into a stranger by evening and leaves him filled with rage he needs to put somewhere. He put it on me. The first time he hit me, I told myself it wouldn't happen again. The second time, I told myself he was grieving. By the 10th time, I had stopped telling myself stories. I was just surviving. Day by day, hour by hour, trying to be invisible enough to stay safe. Then there was the gambling. I found out slowly, a piece of land sold, a field gone quiet, a creditor's voice at the gate. Rajesh had a sickness for gambling that his father's shadow had kept contained. Without that shadow, it ran free. He lost everything. The fields. The house. The savings that should have lasted generations. One by one, like beads falling off a broken string, everything disappeared. And then I found out I was pregnant. I sat with that knowledge alone for 3 days before I told him. I held it inside me like the most precious secret I had ever kept. A child. A reason. A new beginning growing in the dark of my body while everything around me fell apart. When I finally told Rajesh, he did not hold me. He did not smile. He looked at me with flat, dead eyes and said, "I don't need this child. Go to the hospital. Get the medicine. Get rid of it." I felt the world stop. I said, "I will not." What happened next, I will not describe in full. I cannot. Some pain lives in the body in places words cannot reach. I will only say that Rajesh became something that night that no word in any language I know is adequate to name. And when it was over, the child I had been carrying for 11 weeks was gone. I lay on the floor of my own home and I grieved in silence. Because there was no one to hear me. Because the man who had caused it was asleep 10 feet away. Because the God I used to pray to felt very far and very quiet. I think that was the night I began to truly understand what the sadhu had been trying to tell me. Rajesh's body gave out before his spirit did. The drinking had been destroying his kidneys for years, quietly, the way these things happen, invisibly, until suddenly they don't. He collapsed one afternoon and was rushed to the government hospital. The doctor pulled me aside with a face that told me everything before she spoke. Both kidneys had failed. He needed surgery. And the surgery would cost more money than my mother and I had ever seen in our lives combined. I did not ask myself whether he deserved to be saved. I did not let myself go to that place. I just thought, he is my husband. He is my responsibility. I will find a way. My mother and I went door to door through the village. We asked everyone. We begged with whatever dignity we had left. Some people gave a little. Most people looked away. We gathered what we could, a fraction of what was needed, and rushed back to the hospital. We were too late. I stood beside his body and I felt something I have never been able to fully explain. Not grief exactly. Not relief. Something heavier than both. Like standing at the edge of a cliff after a very long walk and realizing the cliff does not have a bottom. I had given years of my life, my unborn child, my safety, my pride, and this was what it had all amounted to. A body in a government hospital and an empty, sold-off house waiting for me to return to. I was 26 years old and I was a widow. My mother held me for a long time that night. She said nothing. She just held me, and I felt her arms shaking, and I knew she was fighting her own grief as hard as I was fighting mine. We performed the last rites together, just the two of us, and then we went home to the small rented room that was all we had left. Months passed. My mother, in her quiet, stubborn way, began to talk about the future. She said I was young. She said I deserved companionship and warmth and a life that was not only about surviving. She said I should consider marrying again. I told her no. I said, "Who will marry a widow, mother? Who will look at me and see a wife and not a burden? My life for happiness is over. I know that now." And then, because I could not stop myself, I said what I had been thinking since Rajesh died. I said, "Do you remember what the sadhu told me? He said 2 marriages. He was right about the suffering. He was right about the difficulty. But I will not let the second marriage happen. I will fight the fate he described. I will change what is written." My mother looked at me for a long time before she spoke. She said, softly, Suman, if the sadhu's words were true, if the suffering came exactly as he said, then maybe the second marriage was written too. And maybe you cannot fight what is written any more than you could have fought what already happened. I didn't answer her. I just walked away. I did not want to believe that my life was something happening to me rather than something I was living. It was around that time that two men came to the village from the city. Visitors. They had an uncle named Burju whose house sat directly across from ours. One of the men was named Raju. The other was named Banti. Raju was quiet and decent. The kind of man you notice because he is genuinely still in a world full of noise. Banti was his opposite, loud, restless, the kind of charming that has nothing underneath it. I noticed them the way you notice strangers in a small village. Briefly, with mild curiosity, and then not at all. But Banti noticed me. Burju told them I was a widow. I learned this later. And something about that information changed the way Banti looked at me, like I had gone from being a person to being an opportunity. A woman alone. A woman who had already suffered. A woman who might be grateful for attention, or too broken to resist it. He began to watch me. I felt it without understanding it, that particular prickling feeling at the back of your neck when someone's gaze has intention in it. I kept my distance. I kept my eyes down. I told myself I was imagining it. I was not imagining it. One morning I was walking back from the well, water pot balanced on my hip, moving quickly the way you do when you want to get home before the heat sets in. Banti came from nowhere on a horse, cutting in front of me, blocking the path like he owned every part of the world he stood in. He said things that I will not repeat. He smiled the way men smile when they believe their smile is a kind of power. He reached toward me. I told him clearly, do not touch me. Move your horse. Let me pass. I will scream this village down if I have to. He laughed. And then he took something from his pocket, a cloth, a small bottle, and before I could run, before I could scream, the world went dark. I woke up on the floor of an abandoned hut at the edge of the village. My head was pounding. My body felt wrong and heavy. And Banti was standing over me, saying things in a low voice that made my skin go cold. And then the door opened and Raju stepped in. He shoved Banti away from me. Hard. The commotion brought the sounds outside, villagers gathering, voices rising. Banti ran. He slipped out the back like the coward he was, leaving Raju standing there in the middle of a scene that told the wrong story entirely. The crowd that burst through the door saw a city man standing over an unconscious village woman. They saw what they expected to see. They grabbed Raju. They raised their voices and their hands, and they were ready to do what angry crowds do to men they believe are guilty. I came back to myself slowly. My mother's hands were on my face, water on my skin, her voice calling me back from wherever I had gone. And I heard the sounds of the crowd and I understood immediately what was happening. I stood up. My legs were not steady but I made them work. I walked outside and I raised my voice above all the others and I said, "Stop. This man did nothing wrong. This man saved me." The real villain, I told them, was already running. The village moved fast once the truth was spoken. Banti was found before he reached the main road. The police came. The charges were filed. I stood as witness and I did not flinch and I did not look away and I said every word that needed to be said. But when it was over, when the noise died down and the crowd dispersed and my mother took me inside, I fell apart. Completely. Quietly. In a way I had not allowed myself to fall apart since Rajesh died. I had survived so much. Too much. The beatings. The lost child. The poverty. The loneliness. The widow's silence. And now this. I sat alone that night and I made a decision that frightens me now to remember. I decided I was done. Not with Banti. Not with the village. With everything. With the weight of a life that kept demanding more from me than I had left to give. I walked to the well in the dark. I stood at its edge and looked down into the black water far below and I thought, I am so tired. I am so unbearably tired. And then a hand closed around my wrist. Raju's voice was the gentlest thing I had heard in years. He said, "Stop. Please. I know what happened to you. I know what has been done to you. But your life does not belong to your pain. It belongs to you. He kept holding my wrist. Not pulling. Just holding. Like an anchor. He said he had watched me in the village, not the way Banti had watched me, like something to be taken, but the way you watch someone who moves through the world with a dignity that makes you want to be better. He said he had seen my strength before I had seen it myself. He said he wanted, if I would allow it, to spend his life making sure I never stood at the edge of a well in the dark again. I cried so hard my whole body shook. I cried for the child I had lost. I cried for the girl who had held out her hand to a stranger and heard a prophecy she had spent years running from. I cried for my mother's bleeding hands and my own stolen years, and every single night I had lain awake in a house full of violence telling myself it would get better. And then I let Raju lead me away from the edge. The wedding was quiet and full of light. The whole village came. My mother stood beside me in a new saree. I had saved for months to buy it, and she looked at me with the kind of eyes that say everything without needing any words at all. When I touched her feet before leaving, she held my face in her hands and looked at me for a long, long time. I said, "He was right, Mother. The old man was right. The suffering was real. And the second marriage was real. And I could not fight what was written, no matter how hard I tried." My mother smiled. Not sadly. Fully. The way she used to smile before my father left, before the hard years took that smile away and kept it for themselves. She said, "Maybe fate is not always punishment. Maybe it is also this." I think about that a lot now. I used to believe that fate was the enemy. That the sadhu's words were a curse I was always running from. But here is what I know now, on the other side of all of it, the suffering was real, yes. Every word of it was real. But the second chance was also written. The kindness was also written. The morning I wake up now with no fear in my chest, that was also written. You cannot pick and choose which parts of your story to believe. You cannot say fate exists only when it hurts you. If the dark was written, then so was the light. I almost didn't stay to find out. And that is the part one think about most, the well in the dark, the tired voice in my own head saying it was over. And Raju's hand on my wrist. One moment. One decision. Between the end of my story and the rest of it. I am still here. And the rest of it turned out to be worth everything I survived to reach it.